Linn-Mar Board of Directors meeting will be called to order at 5 p.m. in the boardroom of the Learning Resource Center. Can you please take roll to determine a quorum?
Buckholz?
Here.
Maury?
Here.
Nelson?
Here.
Rollinger?
Here.
Walker?
Here.
Wall?
Here.
Weaver?
Here. I move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Barry and a second by Sandra. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. I know we have informational reports first up, but we're going to just take a moment and recognize that today is the anniversary of the September 11th attacks. So we're going to just have a moment of silence in remembrance of those who served and those who fell. We're going to start off this evening with our update from HR. Carla, I believe you're ready to go.
Yes. I know you're all very excited, waiting for this all day long, so let's just hop right into it. Okay, so I'm going to give you an update on tonight, really with our staffing and our strategic plan, and specifically under people and culture, recruitment, and workplace satisfaction and retention. Recruitment and workplace satisfaction and retention. So recruiting this last year has been interesting. We did do a lot of career fairs. We did one specifically at Grantwood AEA. We had a lot of student teacher hires, and then we also had, this was the first year of the TPRA grant program, and it went just swimmingly well. Ask Nathan, he'll tell you. So classified for support staff, we did a transportation job fair, classified job fair, homecoming parade, TPRA grant, high school students with that, and then we also did some yard signs. These are some pictures of things that we did. So if you look at the little one on the left, she looks a little bit like Heather in HR. So she rode the bus and she helped with the candy, so she had a great time, even though she doesn't go to Linn-Mar, which is too bad. But so this last year was the third year we participated in the homecoming parade, and we're going to do it again this year, so it should be super fun. We do throw candy with, you see at the bottom, Join the Pride. It's just a little card that we tape candy to it and we hand it out. You know, we're hiring, those kinds of things. We did a transportation job fair. We had ice cream social there. We had bus drivers there. We had a bus there. Showed them everything that they needed to do. We helped with applications, had referral bonuses, and so on and so forth. At the classified job fair that we had walking tacos and ice cream again. We had some hiring managers there, some facilitators there, a benefits rep there, and we also had referral bonuses for that. So our results for that, when you look at our targeted classified applicants versus hires, so the colors are kind of hard to see, but transportation, we ended up in that career fair, we had 8 applicants and 5 hires out of that. So about 63% of those that came, we hired. For our classified job fair, we had 13 applicants, 5 hires, so about 39% of the people who came we actually were able to hire. We did find that there's just some struggles with I don't have a right to work, those kinds of things. So there's not a whole lot we can do about that right now, but we're working on it. And then the parade, we had 8 applicants out of that, 3 hires, which is only 37%. And I'm attributing that to we didn't throw out chocolate. So had we thrown chocolate out, maybe we'd have a few more people. We also did the teacher paraprofessional registered apprenticeship. So we partnered with Kirkwood and Mount Mercy this last year. 22-23, we had 27 employees participate, and 19 high school students participated. And this year we have 22 employees participating, and we're working on getting our student participants right now. This is the program where they're just trying to get a paraprofessional certificate. We also partnered with Mount Mercy for K-6 elementary education, and they could get an optional endorsement in special ed level 1 or in reading. So that started with 24 employees, and then this year we have 16 participating, and they are going to be student teaching this spring. So that's very exciting for all of us. So right now we're partnering again with Mount Mercy to recruit those education majors for part-time associates in the spring, while our candidates in the program are doing their student teaching. So we're trying to get a hold of that early. They do have a job fair on September 26th. We're gonna try to go to that and then have some follow-up meetings with education majors, and then schedule some times to have a classroom on campus to talk to them in person. Certified hires. So as you can see, the high school had 10 new certified staff. Elementary had 11, intermediate had 6, and middle school had 5. It felt like a lot more than that this year, just because it's been hard to recruit people. So it felt like we were trying to fill 100 slots when really it wasn't that many. Again, we did the virtual career fairs. We didn't get a lot of real results from those, but we're hoping to do more of those in person. A lot of those were online, and sometimes you just don't get a whole lot of participation when you have an online career fair. We did hire 6 fall student teachers in January, so they were permanent subs basically in one building, so we could actually evaluate them and their performance. So that turned out really well. We placed all of them, which is fantastic. We also did the teacher paraeducator registered apprenticeship to try to get more certified teachers. We did post some positions at geographically probably closer, the HBCUs. You know, they'd be used to the snow and the climate. You know, they wouldn't be shell-shocked at what is snow. So we did work with Lincoln University, Langston University, and Tennessee State University. When we inquire with them, typically they just say, oh, just put it on our job board. We kind of attribute that to they're trying to get their own to stay in their own states. So we're going to try to work through that again this year. Maybe with they've lifted some of the state licensure requirements, so maybe we can get more people that way, but they'd have to want to come to Iowa. I mean, who wouldn't want to come to Iowa? So this year for student teachers, we have 31 total in the fall. We have 2 in special ed, 5 in middle school, 7 high school, 4 intermediate, and 13 elementary ed. We did have quite a few this year that I saw was in PE, so I'm not sure where that comes from, but we're going to try to grab them and see what we can do to get them to work for Linn-Mar. So all new hires. So this is basically a pie chart of all of the staff that we hired so far this year. Of the 46 classified staff, 30 are student support associates, and we still have positions open. That's been very difficult to fill. High school and elementary, as you can see, they were in the double digits. We did end up, I know I said we hired 6 of our student teachers to sub. We actually, in the end, hired 7. She did not sub here, but she wanted to come back to Linn-Mar, so we did end up with 7 of our student teachers. So overall, we had a pretty good year. So workplace satisfaction. We worked last year for the first time with, it's called Teach Upbeat, and it's an engagement survey. So how that worked last year was we partnered with them to put together a climate survey, and they have specific questions that they've researched in teachers and staff in education. So we went through the whole survey process. They analyzed everything for us, and then met with, at the time it was Shannon and Bob and Nathan and myself, and kind of talked about some areas we might have saw for some improvement. Really, we did really well. So there were some areas. And then they actually coached each and every principal and supervisor on their scores and how can we get that up, some different strategies. So now we're going to do that again this year and kind of compare results. Participation rates last year, pretty high. I thought that was pretty good. When you talk about teachers, obviously we're talking about teachers. Non-instructional are associates, anyone who's been part of the classroom or have direct contact with students. And department would be everybody else. So it was broken down by departments, for example, transportation or things like that. So we had a little bit lower participation there. So they kind of went through some strengths for compared to other districts, and so we did really, really well. We were really awesome with collaboration, evaluation. People really felt like it was a good evaluation tool, and they felt like it was fair. And then self-efficacy, most of our people feel like they're successful as an employee, which is really very important when you come to work every day. So when you're talking about teachers and non-instructional staff, again, those people who are inside of the schools directly with the students, areas of strength, care and commitment, obviously people feel like we care about them and we care about our students. Equity was really high as well. People feel like they're included and that they're able to bring whatever they have to the table. Satisfaction and purpose. Basically, they all feel really positive about that, and I would hope so because I think it's kind of a calling when you come into the education world. And then belonging and well-being, they feel like they belong. So I think that's really, really important. When you look at areas of strengths for the departments, these are all the people who are not within the schools. So they felt their work-life balance was pretty good. Satisfaction and purpose, again, they felt like they had a purpose. Belonging and well-being was high as well, and then self-efficacy. So most people feel like they're successful here as an employee. So areas for improvement. We're talking again about teachers and non-instructional staff. Appreciation was a little bit up there, so we're trying to look at some different recognition opportunities. Some were high, we kind of had 50-50 on that, but when you compare it to other people, they thought we could improve there, but 65% isn't too bad to be positive. Cultural competence, only about 60% of teachers and 50% of staff felt like they could openly discuss issues of race, so that's a little concerning. Work-life balance, I know there's a lot of workload and it continues to get more and more for teachers, so I'm not surprised that that's a little bit lower. And then diversity, only 36% of teachers shared that they feel like our staff mimics our school when it comes to diversity. Areas for improvement within departments, employee voice and leadership, shared that only about half of people felt they shared an active role in shaping what's going on within policies. Cultural competence, openly discuss issues, 44% is pretty low. Compensation and career path, that doesn't surprise me. 32% felt that they were compensated fairly for taking on extra responsibilities. And then again, appreciation. 60% positive isn't terrible, but we could sure improve that score. So what did we do with all of this information? So UPBE completed the coaching sessions with supervisors, coaching sessions with principals, and then follow-up meetings if needed or wanted by the principals. So really those coaching sessions focused on targeting specific areas and again discussing strategies of how can we get our scores higher, what do we need to do. It was mentioned that a trend in the data suggested that implementing new curriculum may have affected scores. Just because at any point in time it's very stressful to implement new curriculum. So that could have, I mean, if we weren't doing that last year, that score could have been very different. But one of the biggest strengths we had overall was principal and teacher trust. I thought that was really awesome. So, what's next? So we are going to do it again. Our open window is October 23rd through November 3rd. And then November 29th through December 4th, they're going to meet with each supervisor, administrator, and coach like they did last year. They'll compare results. It'll be nice to have 2 years worth of results so you can kind of see. It's really cool. They have a heat map. You can kind of see where people are at depending on their endorsements or their grade level. It's very interesting. And then HR is a goal. We want to increase that department staff participation to 75% if we can, and increase teaching and non-instructional staff to 90%. So why are people leaving? People have a lot of different reasons why they leave, but really some of the themes were some of them felt students were slipping through the cracks. Pay, that is mostly from associates. It's not a big surprise to us. And it kind of looks like we need to work on communications in general. And communication, you can never have too much of it. So overall, other employment, we're digging a little deeper to see if they left the profession altogether or if they just went somewhere else. Satisfaction ratings, we were pretty high on supervision received, working conditions, and work schedule. I think we need to work a little bit more on training and pay. And then finally, moving forward, we're going to continue to administer those exit interviews, start doing our state interviews, revitalize our affirmative action plan, work with HR staff. Basically, we're trying to figure out recruiting strategies and who's going to be doing what. Continue, obviously, with Upbeat, focus heavily on that employee well-being. It's pretty important. And then continue to value employee engagement and make it a #1 priority, not just in HR, but throughout the district. So, do you have any questions?
I have a couple questions and kind of comments. First of all, we had 19 teachers retire early, correct? And we hired how many? 39? 39? So actually, how many teachers do we actually have in the district?
Probably about 570.
So I guess what I look at, I'm just looking at in general, because we look at larger numbers because we did lose a fair number of associates and
Yep.
all of that kind of stuff. But the teachers in our district are quite happy. You know, we do lose some. I've noticed we've lost a fair number to relocation or that kind of stuff. And we're still a destination. Teachers still want to come here.
Yep.
And like you said, you used the word satisfaction 3 or 4 different times in there. So that's just a comment. I don't need a response. I just thought that was an interesting number. So really, the net number, just kind of actual attrition, because that's kind of an average number for us over the last few years, that 30, right around mid-30s to upper 30s. That's just a normal number. So, okay, thank you.
Yep.
When we did, things like early separation last year, part of that consideration is always, are we going to be able to fill those? I know we struggle with the support positions, but the teaching positions, are we struggling to fill those?
Yes.
Or we are?
Yes.
Were there any that we were unable, how many do we have still open? Or are we good?
We had one special education, one BD stay open all year last year, but we did fill it this year. It's kind of just depends on where it is. I was very shocked this year that we just did not have the elementary applications, and I don't think we're alone. No one had them. So it was a little disconcerting, but we just keep trying to find them.
Do we have specific classrooms or do we have openings that aren't filled right now for teachers?
All teachers' positions are filled. There's probably 2 right now that we have long-term approved subs right now.
Okay.
I just wanted to add a little bit with what Barry was saying. When at the beginning of the year, when we met the new teachers, there was a significant number of Linn-Mar grads that are coming back here. I think that says a lot, not only for the strength of the district, but when you're 18 years old and you're crossing the stage and you can go anywhere, do anything, that type of attitude. And then to step back intentionally to want to teach in this district, and I know we still got a couple at UNI that are planning on coming back. I think it says a lot, not only about the district, I think it says a lot about our city. I think it says a lot about family values that we have. When you have people that are 22 years old and coming back and this is how they wanted to start their career, I was really impressed with the number that we had that day.
Yep.
And they're fired up and ready to go.
Yep, it's a good group.
You mentioned that the virtual career fair wasn't super successful. Were there any other things that you learned that worked exceptionally well, or other things that didn't work quite so well that you're looking to change? That I'm assuming this gave you some sort of an idea of where we can change, what types of things?
I would say what we've learned most is I think in person is the way to go for anything that you do. So, you know, contacting colleges, you know, it's best just to go and to meet with the students and talk with the students, talk with their advisors. Virtual career fairs were great in 2020, you know, when that's really all you could do. It's just the popularity isn't there anymore. So we probably won't be doing a whole lot of, we'll do it, but it's not a lot of effort on our part on some of them. Some of them are a lot, but we don't really get our bang for our buck for that. Did that answer your question?
Other than our right around Cedar Rapids here, do we go physically, people from Linn-Mar go to some of the other colleges to represent
You mean
Linn-Mar?
outside of Iowa?
Yeah, in the state? I'm just curious, I don't know.
We have not.
Okay.
On exit surveys, I'm curious if it's standard questions about why they're leaving and it's like a drop down or checkbox, or if it's more open-ended, and if we're getting any feedback as to external
we do
reasons.
have areas that we can get actual feedback. I didn't put it all on here, but that's when you kind of start to see some trends.
So I'm curious, based on that, if you're seeing trends around, if you feel like more of the trends are around things related to things that we have any control over, or if they're things that are outside of our control. We know that obviously there's a lot that has impacted what teachers can do, how they're doing their jobs, and what their jobs are, that are coming from legislation or are coming from other things. And so I'm just curious what you're seeing and how teachers are responding to that, and if that's impacting what they're saying on their exit interviews.
This last year, we did notice there's a lot of outside noise, and it's really hard for teachers and staff to not hear that and feel like I'm not valued. I did see a lot of that this year, which is sad, but it's, you know, the world we live in right now. But there are a couple things we can control. Some of it had to do with training, right? Pay, I mean, there's only so much you can do with pay, but, you know, we can do what we can for that. So those were the big ones.
So I thought, you know, overall it looked really good. The one thing that I saw that kind of stood out for me was just a little bit about that appreciation piece, because to your point, to Melissa's point, there are a lot of factors that we just don't have control over, or we have very little control over. But that's something that really costs us nothing. And, you know, I just think if we can kind of, you know, put our heads together and think of creative ways, because I feel like, you know, even though it may be really tough to go to work, you know, on any given day, when you go to work and you do feel appreciated, God, that makes it a whole lot easier. So, but overall, I thought things looked really great.
Yeah, and honestly, appreciation was super high at some schools, but it was never really super low either. And some of that has to do with, I think, culture of the building, what happened this last year. So I think there's, like you said, there's a lot of things that we can do that don't cost money. We have a lot of different ideas that we can throw out there, so, yeah.
That's a pretty common trend
Yes.
on any survey, is for people to feel not that
Right.
they're not appreciated, because it's just an easy thing to not be saying over and over and over again how much you value your employees and how much you value your coworkers. So
Right.
I don't think there's a single like workplace survey that I've ever seen that doesn't say that that's an area in need of improvement. So
Right.
don't feel too bad.
And in that spirit, we really appreciate all the work that you do
For this district, Carla.
Were the surveys anonymous?
They could be. What we try to do first is we try to bring people in person. What we've noticed is if we mail things out, we don't get it back. So people they're really honest. I mean, we get better feedback when they're in person. If you mail it out, they're probably not going to mail it back. So we've tried really, really hard this year to try to get people to come in, or we'll go there. We'll go to their school. But I think in person, and I have a great HR staff, so they're very open and welcoming, and so I think people are willing to open up to them and let them know how we can improve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was great.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
Carla.
you so
Good
much.
report.
Yep.
Just as a reminder, that also checked off a board goal that we had set for ourselves, and we'll continue to get regular updates from Carla throughout the year on when we need our next updates in the spring. Next up, teaching and learning report. Thank you. And the next one also hits 2 board goals for those that are keeping track.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. We are going to, Bob and I share information about our student assessment data. So I know everybody's been looking forward to that. I am passing around, and I do have a couple copies. Just one thing to look at as we go through. I know sometimes we talk about cohort. We're going to show you individual grade level scores as we go through this, but this is the cohort data. So I'll explain that once we get to that spot. But like Britt said, this is really our outcomes for tonight are to engage around these topics. And so the board had asked us to review that in light of their board goals and standards. So we wanted to make sure that we hit like what's the board's role in engaging and learning around the curriculum adoption process, and then the engaging and learning discussions around academic targets for student learning goals and strategies. So we'll hit kind of some of that big overview stuff. Then we'll take a look at our FAST and ISASP data. We'll get into some of our theme school updates, our innovation school, and our leader in me schools. And we'll talk about, as we wrap this up, how we're going to pull this together for principals in our buildings and kind of their school. So, still me? Yes, okay. All right, so first for curriculum adoption. I just think it's really interesting because we haven't gone through this much since I've been here at Linn-Mar. And typically, school districts will do this 7, 8, 10 years, depending on budgets and where things are at. COVID, obviously, with our curriculum adoption process, really complicated things, but it also gave us some funds to hurry some things along in that sense of trying to adopt some curriculum with some of the federal government money that we had. And so what we want to do is just kind of talk through what's the school role and what's the board role. So if you look on that left side, really our role for our staff is to look at curriculum materials that align with our standards and that are research and evidence-based. And we use a lot of different tools. Our curriculum directors and our directors of teaching and learning use a lot of different tools to do that. I also want to clarify that it's a pet peeve of mine, and I'm sure Bob's is too, when people talk about our curriculum, the books we buy and the supporting materials are not the curriculum. The curriculum is the Iowa State standards. Those are on our website. Those are posted by the state. We're required to meet those. What happens is we try to look for materials that help support those standards and at the same time guarantee that kids are learning equitably across the district. So that's our main reason for having resources in hands, is so that 4th grade at Indian Creek versus 4th grade at Westfield, that they have similar experiences, because we know our teaching staff can still choose whatever instructional methods they want to use to meet the standards. And so we really try to look for, through our process and the curriculum review process, which I'll talk about in a minute, are those materials that help us get the best bang for our buck, so to speak, with our standards. So then what our directors do and what our staff does in the buildings is we look at a cycle of materials improvement. Like I said, that's a multi-year process. It could be longer, it could be shorter. That could change depending on if the state standards change, if our materials are outdated. For example, we just approved the purchase of new textbooks in a high school course because it's a Kirkwood course and they changed their course standards, and so therefore we needed to update the textbook. So, but typically for our big curriculum adoptions, really things that we're using K-8, those are on a multi-year, 7 to 10 year basis depending on budget. And so then what we do is we look at offering some type of pilot, some type of training with the materials that helps with our selection process, and then it's our role to implement those curricular materials so that everybody's comfortable with them, using them equitably across the buildings. So that's kind of a look at the school role. The other side provides your role as the board, and so how do you help in that curriculum adoption process? You support the role and hiring of our curriculum directors to do that research and recommend best practice. You discuss recommendations like we did last time, the board discussion around the Imagine Learning platform, to purchase curriculum materials that support our standards, and then help us develop those goals that help stretch us and reach us to those, which is what we've just been working on through our strategic plan process. So what I want you to pay attention to on this side are just really the how this materials adoption process works, because I think we probably don't do a good enough job of making it transparent of what that looks like in the buildings. So the bolded things are really the big steps in each of those areas. So if we start in the top right, we start with best practice, evidence-based programs that would support those state standards. So we're looking at ed research. We do a lot of discussion with our UEN partners. What are you using? What are you seeing good results in? The Ed Reports is a national website that lists kind of grades, instructional materials, and so we use that, or our curriculum directors use that. And so once we have that narrowed down, we move down to the bottom right, where we start reviewing sample materials. Last year and through COVID, over our adoption of Super Kids, Wit and Wisdom, Illustrative Math, we had presentations to the building, we invited staff into those, and often that's done with a committee, and before we even start trying out the curriculum, we set criteria for what we're going to look at if this curriculum is going to be successful for us, and then therefore the one that we would recommend. So they develop that criteria, and when I say they, that's our administrators, our teachers, our staff, with our teaching and learning directors that really go through that process. So once they have that criteria, like these are the things we want this curriculum to match, then we move down to the bottom where we do a pilot, and that could vary. Sometimes we've done specific grade levels. I know for Wit and Wisdom, we did grade levels in 2 different buildings with a pilot. It was actually kind of nice during COVID because of the way we were set up with hybrid, and we had some time to access our teachers a little bit, maybe better than we would have under normal circumstances. And so we had some Zoom meetings with them and set up pilot groups. And so as part of that, then our directors of teaching learning looked at feedback from the teachers compared to that selection criteria. And then we looked at our assessment data. And so we used FAST, especially at the elementary level, to see, okay, in these 2 pilot groups, which one had better results on their scores, along with the feedback from the teachers. We also did a parent survey with some of that. So once we've gathered all of that, then our curriculum directors put together the findings and present that feedback to the building. We had a pilot panel of teachers, so the teachers that tried out the materials came in, and we had several different times scheduled where they could come in and ask those teachers questions, because if they weren't in the pilot, they weren't using those materials, obviously. We shared with them the selection criteria and how the materials supported or didn't support that criteria. And then at that point, we would recommend those and bring a contract to you for board approval of those items. It really doesn't stop there, and in the top left, that's our biggest next step, is to continue to provide professional learning for implementation around those areas. And we've done that through a variety of different ways. The vendors will do on-site PD for our teachers. They did coaching visits last year across the elementary, or maybe that was 2 years ago. For Super Kids, they actually sent out the person that did on-site coaching, and so every teacher had, I think, a 45-minute coaching experience with a person that was trained in the materials, who are often former teachers that do that. And so that's how then we support that through professional learning. So that's how our adoption process works. It's very lengthy. I would say that's a 12 to 18-month process, depending on the materials and how much we have and how many grade levels we're looking at. But that's kind of our process that we use. It would look a little bit different at the high school level just because those are so course and content specific. It's done on a much smaller scale than it would be, say, like, K4 or K8, because that typically just depends on the teachers that are teaching that specific course. So.
A lot of things that Nathan had mentioned were embedded in these adoptions from 2019 to 2022. One of the things that Nathan had mentioned is that we're trying to find materials that fit the Iowa core standards. And right now, there's no perfect curriculum that fits those out there. So the criteria that's developed by our directors of teaching and learning is very specific in looking at how can that fit best here at Linn-Mar. And another thing that they're really thinking of too is how does that articulation work if we have this program K4, does it articulate well to 5, 6, 7, 8, and then onto the high school track with those things? I know Nathan had mentioned, we did a lot of data analyzation when it came to looking at our FAST scores at the elementary, a lot of teacher feedback, and that was just something that we kept in a cyclical nature because right now the number of publishers is dwindling. It seems like if I'm a big publisher, I'll publish everything for Texas because that's a huge market. How does that necessarily fit with Iowa and our standards with this? And that's where we really rely on our teacher input and our directors of teaching and learning to drive those also, and as well as our principals in this also. And so with all that being said, I think you're going to be quite pleased when we go through the data today to look at some of our year-end data, and I think it really, I think we're trending in the right direction.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I'll add is just, we want to thank Carla's team too, HR, just for, filling positions, helping with teaching staff, because this is not easy. And we just got off of teaching COVID, which was hard during COVID for everybody. And now we're asking teachers in some areas to teach 2 brand new, supporting curriculum materials that they hadn't used before. And just the amount of planning and time that took was a lot for our teachers. So like Bob said, there's some nice things in our data that I think you'll like to see, and that's certainly a kudos to our team here with helping getting staff in the buildings, but also to our teaching staff. So,
yeah, I'll jump into some.
sorry, I want to check. Oh, yeah, okay. It's in there. Sorry. I'll let you go first.
We'll have to slap his hand away from the computer there. We'll start with the elementary FAST data analysis. I did not include AEA and state metrics in this. I've got another handout that's up on my desk that I can give you that documents all our FAST data from starting the 2018-19 school year to where we are now, and you can just use that to kind of look through your cohort. If I get a break here, I'll run up and I'll pass that around right now. You can see that we're meeting the percentage of the number screened and how we're approaching as a district getting closer to that 80% metric set by the state. And if you recall a few meetings back, we're not going to be satisfied with that. I really think we have the opportunity to get to that 85% metric through the use of our strategic plan and some of the things Nathan's going to talk about as we get closer to the end.
Before we move on there, I'm sorry, go back. So that 80% goal on the right side, is that statewide? I see you've got 9 schools on the left side. Is that based on 9 schools or statewide?
That is based on statewide. The goal is 80%. The 9 schools that are included in that are our elementary, 7 elementaries.
Gotcha,
And then
okay.
Boulder Peak and Hazel Point are included in that FAST analysis also. And you'll see
that's our score. The
Yeah.
77 is our district score.
Thank you.
Yep, good question, Matt. And so here's, as it breaks out from kindergarten to 6th grade. Here's our mathematics numbers. Again, district-wide, and again, just to reiterate, we outscore our AEA in state. And here's our mathematics by grade level. And before you say what happened to 4th grade, I know that's the obvious one right there. Grades 1 and 2 take early mathematics, and 2 through 4 from now on will take A math. Last year we had our 4th graders take CAPS, which is more conceptually based, so it's not included in this data right here. It's more the students' ability to solve longer equations, mathematical concepts, and things of that nature. So that data is not included when we're talking about early math or A math.
Yeah, so one of the things that Amy put together was just a quick snapshot here of our overall proficiency growth from previous years. So how you read this chart is our grade levels are listed there. So if there's a plus, that means third graders in 2022, our third graders in 2023 scored higher than the previous cohort. So this is not cohort data comparing third year to third and 1 year. This is just overall growth in those grade levels. So a plus means growth, a minus signs means that they were less, and then a circle is that they stayed the same. And if you look over there for science, just remember that we only test in 5th, 8th, and 10th grade for science. So, because as we go through the next slides, and again, you all have this, and for people that are watching or public, it's posted on the board agenda too. I know it's hard to just rotate through all of these, so I'll preface that with what you're going to see in each of these. Is this, and this is a new report in Iowa Assessments. This is our longitudinal look. So this is all 4 of the testing data years that we have under the new test from 2019 on the left to 2023 on the right. You can see the grade and subject area on there. So we've just provided a snapshot for English language arts and math and science for those specific grade levels. And really what we always do when we look at this is look at where's the yellow bar? How many kids are not proficient from the year before? And then where are the blue bars, the 2 colored blue bars, the proficient and advanced students?
Yeah, I really like looking through this because I went back to how were we performing pre-pandemic, and I like in many of these slides we're doing much better than even pre-pandemic. So I'm very pleased with that. It would be really fun just to click through them really fast so you can kind of see it like that, but we're not going to do that to you because I don't know, when I was looking through this, I just really love to see that yellow bar shrink. That means that we're moving in the right direction.
I remember correctly, the state of Iowa did not give, like, we didn't do the test in 2020, which is why that bar is not there?
Yep.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I was remembering that correctly.
They talked about it, but the state couldn't guarantee the test security with kids not being on site, so that's why they didn't do that.
So here's 3rd grade ELA, 3rd grade mathematics, 4th grade ELA, and 4th grade mathematics.
Fifth grade, so we'll move, this one will have 3 scores here. So our first one is our English language arts, grade 5. Here's a look at math. And then 5th graders were tested in science. Again, I think this is an interesting one for comparison, just to Bob's point, pre-pandemic 2019 to post-pandemic where we are in 2023. You know, I know we'd all like for fewer kids to be not proficient, but to Bob's point earlier and what you guys have talked about with our teachers implementing new curriculum, you know, it's kind of like Christmas morning. Like, I wait for this email to come like every day, and I know Amy was asking me, like, have you got this email yet? Because I'm our district test coordinator, and I wait for Pearson and Iowa Testing to say your results are public. Because I really was concerned with the amount of what we asked teachers to do with implementing new curriculums. Is typically you will see a dip in scores before those get better. Obviously, some of our changes at the early grades with Super Kids and Wit and Wisdom, we're not seeing that initial dip, so that to me is promising, to us is promising, and I would hope that we continue to see gains as we go as our teachers get more comfortable with that.
This one's science. What have we changed with science? Do we attribute this? Because science is something we've talked about.
Yeah, good question. We haven't done anything different with science. I shouldn't say that. Maybe the teachers did something more with their science units, but as far as curriculum and
Still the Grant Wood
supporting
packets.
materials, yes.
That's funny.
Well, and too, you know, we've talked about this so many times, that reading is such a big part of, with, you know, how well they do in other subjects. And so if we are, you know, seeing gains in ELA, then to me, it makes sense that you would then see gains in other subject areas as well.
Comprehension of the packets you're reading in
Absolutely.
science and in math. 'Cause they're getting-
Science is our next one to look at, and I mean, I think that this also tells the story of that we've been focused on literacy and math over the last several years. And now as we get in our cycle of having the training done and new materials, then we can start looking at science, because that does need to probably have a refresh, the kits that we're using. So here's 6th grade, English language arts. Grade 6 math. Grade 7 ELA. Grade 7 math. And then our 8th grade scores for ELA, math, and science. I mean, our scores across the board are really good, but I'd really like to just single out the middle schools. That's, for those of you that have middle school kids at home or have been around middle schools, it's an interesting place to be in our buildings. And I always get a kick when I go over there, because I'm like, yeah, that's just, I never worked in middle schools. My experience was in elementary and high school, and middle school kids are certainly different. With all of those challenges being said, our staff's doing a really good job at our middle school, and that's a hard time for kids. We just have, we've got great teachers all across the district, but I was really pleased to see our 5th through 8th, and especially our 7th and 8th grade scores. Take a look at high school. If you remember too, last year with testing was the 22 year, not 23, but the 2022 year was a little bit cumbersome. That was the year we had all the tech issues. We started the test and had to schedule. So here's a look at where ELA is. 9th grade math. 10th grade ELA. 10th grade math. 10th grade science. And then our final group would be our 11th graders. And for math. Again, I know we went through those. In addition to that, the handout that you have will be able to let you track cohort data. So if you follow this, like for example, our 3rd graders that were 3rd graders in 2018-19, who are now 7th graders last year, 8th graders this year. If you follow that top yellow down, you can see how that cohort has scored, and that's the same group of kids, minus kids that have moved in and out, obviously. But that's what that chart does, is kind of give you a look at how the same group of kids is performing. So there's three bar charts on there, ELA at the top, math in the middle, and then science at the bottom.
I know generally speaking our results look really good, but it would be remiss not to mention that we are still driven. As long as we have a yellow bar, we're driven to decrease that every year until it doesn't exist. That's a far-reaching goal, but you start putting that in terms of student faces, like what is 20% of our 4th grade population? How many students is that? And that's what drives us really in teaching and learning, because we have to make sure those kids are prepared in our system or put supports in place so that they can continue to grow academically, so that they have choice through their high school career and post-secondary also, doing what they want to do. So one kid's too many, and that's kind of what we focus on. Another part of this was just thinking about our theme schools, Leader and Me specifically at Wilkins and at Boulder Peak, and Innovation at Bowman Woods. So I'll give you a brief little history of the theme schools, show some timeline, and give you some overarching data with this. So in 2017-28, it was the exploration of themes, and that was basically done in the central office. At that time, I was middle school director of teaching and learning, and middle school is where it's at. I enjoyed my middle school teaching experience a lot, and we were thinking about what we could do for some theme schools, maybe to bolster student achievement, looking at just some different innovative ways to do that. So in conjunction, middle school teaching director and elementary, which happened to be Kelly Crutchmer at that time, we did some exploration. After we did that exploration, we turned it over to the buildings, specifically at Bowman and Wilkins. And here's the timelines for their work. So this is Wilkins' Leader and Me journey. You can see, as I mentioned, it just continues the timeline from 2018 to 2022. And then bouncing a little further forward, 2019 to 2020. And one more jump forward. With Bowman Woods, I'm going to do it just a little differently because I like this graphic that Tina had in one of her slideshows, so showing their theme journey. And then all the different trainings and events that that school took part in. If you see Marcia Kish up there, she's really a guru of blended learning. And a lot of some of this learning actually occurred prior to the pandemic. Once we had the pandemic, everyone became an expert at blended learning. It just moved us along tremendously. So if we look at some data, we'll first start with FAST. And this shows the percent increase from fall to spring. I don't know why it formats weird on this. So for example, if I was at a school and 40% of my kids were proficient in the fall, and I gained 10%, that would be 50%. So that's where those metrics come from. These were the two highest change from fall to spring, greatest percentage of students proficient. Here was their ISASS percentile growth from 2021 to 2022. And I only included these years, not the next year, because this data was taken off the Iowa school reports or the Iowa report card, and they actually group third and fourth graders together. And I can do a lot of good calculations, but I didn't want to make sure that my metrics were right and we're using the same comparison tool. And then we have some survey data also. And that 46 to 76 is an improvement. The 46 is like ineffective. 76 on this particular survey is satisfactory. And then you can see where Boulder Peak took their first one last year.
Measuring or assessing here.
What they're measuring, I'm glad you asked that. I have my notes right here. It's leadership, academics, and building culture. And then they lump that all into one score in the survey data. I can break it out. If I had it right ahead of you, I could break it out in each category, and I can provide that data for you. So, but those are the three areas that they measure. One of the things that I will say before we switch over to student learning goals and strategies, there's a lot of intangibles that go with this also. Like if you look at all our building improvements, there's so many factors that go into that. It's hard to say that this one thing drives this result in the school setting, but this is just a 10,000-foot overview of some possible data that you could look at and examine.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that we don't have a requirement that every school be a theme school. The theme was totally up to the building principal and their teaching staff on what they decided to do with that. I'm not aware, I don't know that we'll have other buildings jumping on theme ideas. I mean, really, it started back with the high school. They were the first one to start with Marzano's High Reliability Schools work, what, 10 years ago, maybe?
10 years ago.
And so that was kind of the start of this, hey, we want to have our theme and do this work. Well, obviously, High Reliability Schools has gone district-wide, but this stuff, we would not have a district requirement to be a theme or a not theme school. It's totally up to that staff. Yeah?
How does the theme fit in with the district-wide priorities and goals? So the things that we decide to do district-wide, how does that fit into a theme school who has decided to do all of this other stuff on top of that?
I would say I would start with some of it in HRS level 1, a safe and caring environment with those things as far as building the culture of the building. If you're thinking more innovation, that could go into instructional strategies as far as engagement, student feedback, the different elements that deal with that.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would add, when we did some of that alignment work with, especially Bowman Woods, when they started with the innovation stuff, A lot of that is covered in the HRS indicators. Now, it's not word for word, but a lot of those things would be crossovers. The other one that we did a lot of crossover work last year was with the Leader in Me schools, and that is almost in full alignment with our conditions for learning and our social emotional learning that we have. In fact, we did, and Melissa and Lisa's team worked on that last year some too, of lining up all the things that were in conditions with learning with what kids are asked to do within Leader in Me, and there's a lot of crosswalk there, so.
I guess I was thinking more along the lines of curriculum and expectations. So we purchase as a district Character Strong, for example.
Yep.
Is that fully implemented in the same way in a theme school as it is in every other school?
I'm looking at you. Didn't we say that we were doing that across all the buildings with that?
In the same way that the other buildings are? So with the teachers doing the 4 lessons and guidance doing the 5?
That's where the shift is at Wilkins. The school counselor will be implementing all 5 of the new pieces. Classroom teachers are being asked to try to support that, but it's not as supportive across the gen ed as it is, but it is one of the implementation models that are strong outlined. So we are tracking with that.
Good, thanks for letting us pick on you over there. Okay, so our last outcome was the student learning goals. So how are we pulling this all together, and what do our strategies look like for that? Well, it really aligns nicely to the strategic plan that we all worked on and just recently approved. So you can see our goals in there. The first one is to increase those scores by 3%. The other thing that we've done, and if we're going to target specific growth in the areas of Iowa assessments and FAST scores, we need to make sure that that second one is that we're catching up those kids that aren't quite at benchmark more so than the other students. And I'll give you a great example. In FAST data, there's, we'll see it every year with kids that are tested in the fall, make a ton of growth to the spring, but they're just not quite to that benchmark level yet. Well, if you look at back where they started in the fall, we're still really happy with that growth. So that's why through the strategic plan, we targeted that 6% for any identified subgroups, which could be free and reduced lunch students, could be our students of diverse backgrounds, it could be our special ed students, it could be our gen ed kids in maybe a certain grade level. Maybe we're seeing areas where they're discrepant and there's a subgroup and all the other building is meeting benchmark, but that one isn't. So we've asked our principals to really start working on a draft of a plan to pull in these goals that we can meet, the strategic plan goals. And how we're going to do that is we worked with them in June by identifying those subgroups. This Wednesday at Leadership, we are going to have a school improvement building plan goal form sheet that they will do, that Bob and I will work with them on. We will share that with our teaching and learning department and our curriculum directors. What that's going to have is what specific actions are you taking to meet that increase in 3%. That's a shift for us with professional development. We have always been kind of professional development for all, one-size-fits-all approach in our department. This is going to be very specific and very differentiated by building. It could mean that one of our buildings selects first grade. Like, that's my focus area. That's my leverage point. Historically, my grades are lower in first grade for whatever reason. We're going to dig into that. We're going to do some PD around that. It could be that we're going to do some building-wide strategies for all of our readers or math students around our math talks or specific literacy strategies. So what we've walked them through is what are the areas, what's our strategic plan goal, and then what we're going to do on Wednesday is we're going to have them pull that together and say, okay, now what actions are you going to do for professional learning to directly meet these goals? And then Bob and I will work with them as evaluators. We're the ones that oversee the principals on those school improvement plans and the follow-up. We're developing a PD hub so that we can put things and link things in so that, when I've got, 5 buildings, you've got 7, like what's going on in what building at what day, where do I need to be, where can I help? And so that's the biggest shift this year. We really think targeted improvement is going to rely on our principals to be more strategic in their thinking and their alignment. So those are our next steps, and that's a look at, are we forgetting anything? Okay, that's a look at our student achievement. Thank you. Questions?
Going back a little bit,
Yeah.
in the year-over-year data you shared, through all of the different grade levels up through, obviously we know what our inputs are as far as different curriculum, and eventually we'll be able to see, hopefully, a positive change in when we put that curriculum in and what it did as far as reducing that yellow box, right? I'm curious what the state does differently, because now we're looking at this over 5 years, 19 through 23, as far as what their proficiency bar is and how close of an apples to apples comparison is that really? I have a hard time believing that the state leaves that the same, because it can't really.
You mean 2019 to 2023?
Right, so
proficiency change?
what they're using, I'm assuming there's some sort of formula that they're using through tests and that sort of stuff. How much has that side changed?
Amy, help. I don't think it has. I think when they did the norming from the old Iowa assessments, it used to be when we did percentile rank, and the new assessments still provide percentile rank. Like, you used to get a number like 78 on Iowa percentile rank. So this aligns with percentile rank, and the previous method was to use the 41st percentile. If you were above that, you were proficient. There is a really strategic calculation in the Iowa Assessments Manual that set proficiency at a scale score instead of percentile rank, which is a certain number of items based on the grade level test. And I don't think that has changed over time. That's the same and is consistent, I believe.
I don't think that's changed either. The only thing I can think of back to 2019 was, were they still working on that writing portion? Could be the only thing I would think of.
Yeah, you mean norming that? Yeah. And they didn't have percentile ranks the first year because we didn't have anything to gauge it to. But these, the graphs that you saw in there, these should be the same cutoff for proficiency in 19 as in 2023.
We can research that too, and I
Yeah,
can update you
I'll
guys.
check into that. If you want some really heavy math, I'll send you what's in the manual.
No, I don't know that I need all that, but I was just kind of curious if the threshold that the state is using through their formulas, does that change at all? Because if it does, then
Yeah.
it will change our data. That was my.
Right, good question.
My experience has been it only ever changed when we changed the name and the test was a completely different iteration. So when we moved from Iowa Assessments to ISASP, and I can't even remember what it was called before.
ITEDS.
ITEDS.
And
yeah.
I think they really do kind of have to keep that the same, right? Because otherwise, it's going to tell you nothing.
Right.
So,
I have a question for you. When I'm looking at these just overall in terms of trends, one of the things that really jumps out to me is that grade level wise, we're doing really well until we're not. So, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, all have really strong data, and I feel really proud of our district's numbers in ELA, math, and then we get to 9th grade and our numbers plummet. And I'm curious what our why is for that, because it's, for the most part, the same students, because even when we look at this is why I like this the cohort information, we can see that those kids used to be at 83, 82, and then they go to 71 and 70, and they were at 86, and then they go down to 70. And so I'm curious what we know or what we hypothesize as to the why the same cohorts of students are 85% proficient when they're in 6th grade, and by 10th or 11th grade, they're at 75% proficient and down into the 60s in some situations.
Yeah, I want to answer that, and I don't want the answer to come off as being like defensive or dismissive of the test, but I mean, I had the same thought, especially overseeing the high school, as I looked at those scores, like, what's happening there that's different? It's a real challenge to administer the test in the high school, just because of the amount of kids. I think there's a difference when you're in 5th grade and you're sitting with your teacher in your classroom and you've had that teacher all year, and they say, you know what, we really want you to give your best on this. And I'm certainly not blaming our staff or our kids, but I think the high school kids lose a little bit of sense of that. I hear that a lot from the student groups, that kids don't care, they don't try, they don't have any sense of why we have to do this. Because you're right, like when I look at the number of kids successful in AP courses and CTE courses and our grades and ACT scores doesn't necessarily match up with this. You know, the previous year we tried the assessment over a couple days and didn't work. This last year we tried to listen to high school kids. We did them all in one day. I don't know that that was the best either. So we're still trying to figure out some of those administration things. I don't want to blame that on that because I think we have high quality teaching in all of our grade levels. But I do think the engagement of kids with this test at the high school is a real challenge.
So can I ask how our high school scores compare to the state in comparison to how our middle school scores compare to the state? Because if our high school scores are comparative to the middle school scores, meaning like if we're right at benchmark with middle school scores and then all of a sudden we're below benchmark and all the other high schools are doing better than us, then that tells us maybe we're doing the tests wrong. And maybe somebody else has figured out something that we could learn from.
Yeah.
Not that we're doing it wrong. I shouldn't say that.
We can
way,
get that,
but-
Melissa, I know, because
Yeah.
let
we've
me
shown
get
that in the
I don't
past.
have
I'm
that,
just
but we just were on
curious.
a call with, I'm talking with College Community next week, their curriculum director at the high school, same thing, like, they want to know how we administer, how do we set them up?
Yeah.
Are we incenting kids in any way? So she was anxious to have us share with our scores. She actually emailed me a template today to get that sent out. So I can get you some of that. Let me look and I can pull that for you.
What you're saying resonates. I mean, it's probably all on computers now, but I remember filling in the dots in high school, and there were definitely kids that were like, what shape can I make if I fill the dots in this way or that way? So I would like to hope that the majority of our students aren't doing that still, but I also somewhat remember being a high school student, and those weren't the greatest days.
If they are, let's hope that at least it's consistent across the state and it's not just Linn-Mar. And if it is just Linn-Mar, then let's figure out why.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
Figuring out why is definitely.
I just think it's really hard.
Human
too. One
nature
last thing
doesn't
I'll add
change.
is,
Yes, exactly.
you know, we send kids in the high school to a classroom with a teacher they've never been in all year because we have to split them up in manageable groups. So you have kids
That
with
seems
test
odd.
anxiety, and I've now got to go here, and I don't know this person at all, nor do I know anybody sitting next to me. And so Jeff and I have spent a lot of time talking about that. He's used his student advisory. He's talked with his leadership team. They've really tried to tweak that every year to kind of help that. We're just struggling with the number of kids and how we administer that.
If you think of a junior, they may have already taken an ACT and been accepted into college also. So what bearance does this have on my future? None?
I think that a lot of what you've said is probably absolutely true in terms of how these scores, drop off. I have no doubt that there's a lot of that at play, and I think we talked about some of that at psych as well. Thank you for this. This is really great. It's super visual, and
I knew you'd ask me about that.
yeah. This
That's
is
why I had that
awesome.
ready to go.
This is awesome. The
Love
only thing
it.
I would say is I think it's kind of unfortunate. It's like this gives us a great snapshot, but one of the things it doesn't show is, we might not get a kid quite to that proficient level, but that doesn't mean they haven't grown. And I have no doubt with our staff that those kids who are not yet proficient are making gains.
I think next time we talk to you, we'll share the state just got a new tool that we were just trained on in July. And it's to measure growth, and it's actually now, it's free to us. It's the state's managing this software. It's called EVOS. I don't really know a lot about it yet even though we spent a whole day looking at it, it was really complex. But it will show students growth. So even
That's
if they're not
awesome.
there,
That would be
it'll
great.
actually show us growth in cohorts too. Like we could look at
Yep.
all of third grade and say, okay, based on these kids' scores last year, we would predict that they would grow by this much. And then did you meet that trajectory? Are you above? Are you below?
That's
So
awesome.
there's a lot of cool tools in there. And I think once we have our goals to do some training with our principals over the year, we'll share that with you. It's just, if I put it up on the screen, I wouldn't be able
Not
to tell you.
quite yet. Not quite yet.
That would be great.
It's not, it
That
hasn't
would
met
be
prime
huge
time yet.
to
So
be able
my-
to see that.
I just have one question for you. Talking about those theme schools. So I see that the data is positive, And so my only question would be is if we're seeing those scores improve in that way, to that degree, but yet we're saying we're not going to make schools participate in that. Do you have any concerns in terms of equity, right? If you're saying like this really is effective, then to me, the next question would be, well, then why aren't we doing it at every school in some way, right? Not necessarily that every school has to do the exact same theme, right? Like we would want input from administrators and teachers and all of that, but I guess that's the thing that stands out to me is there an equity piece that we're missing?
Good question. It's probably a little bit inequitable right now. In fact, that our STEAM schools have to do more, I would say, like staff and their group actually have higher demand on them. And I'll use, for example, Leader and Me. They were supposed to have 2 days of PD training. Well, they had to build that in around everything else that we were doing. We didn't build in extra time for that. So it's already a little bit more imbalanced, and we caution the buildings about that. Like, hey, if you're going to do this, that's your choice as a building. I would say that we would continue monitoring that. I mean, HRS, the High Reliability Schools, was a good framework that once high school started using it, we saw, hey, this has promise as a framework for all of our other buildings. I just don't know. I think it depends on, because our buildings also have a very different culture and unique personality to each of them, that some of them it would be appropriate and some it would not. And a lot of them are doing other things that we're asking them to do. These theme schools have just gone above and beyond a little bit.
Sure.
So
And
maybe, I mean, at some point, yes, we might look at that, but we also wouldn't want to require it to, damage what's going on in the building if people are against that at that certain.
But I guess if, looking at that, if I'm a parent and I'm saying, well, really a kiddo at this school is getting an opportunity that my kid isn't getting because they're going to this school, I would really want to continue to keep an eye on that, because if you've got data suggesting that, hey, we're growing in an area from 46 to 76%, which is, I think, one of the metrics that we saw, I think you may start running into some issues there. So that's my only comment. Otherwise, thank you so much. I thought that this was a great presentation, a lot of really good data, and
Piggyback on that. Actually, the whole idea of equity and what's happening in one building not happening in another. Echo Hill is teaching typing, and no other elementary is. So I'd like more information on that, because I think that is also, especially when we start third graders taking these tests and they have to type in their English language and they don't know how to type. For me, that seems like a bit of a barrier for students. So if we want to talk about equity across buildings and opportunities, I would like my kid to learn how to type in school, and he's not. So let's add that to our next conversation too.
Well, 2 comments that I'd like to make. First of all, when you look at the national level, and we keep talking about test scores are struggling, and I know we're not supposed to compare ourselves nationwide, but I look at our yellow line shrinking every day. That's a positive. I don't know where we sit amongst our peers, but that's really not that major of a thought anyway, because we're just trying to increase all of our numbers by a percentage. But just a quick little comment, we have to be so careful, because you don't want to lose kids. And academically, as strong as what we are, I went to an honor session for the junior class 2025, a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Out of 500 and some plus kids, 350 were 3.33 or higher. And of that, almost 100 of those kids were 4.0 or higher. So they're juniors, and those juniors are still thriving and striving to do better because they have academic goals, just from what I'm seeing from my small world anyway. But all those pieces put together tell me that we're working, we're moving. We got a long ways to go, but we've got to make sure we don't lose anybody off of that bottom tier, if that's possible. So.
And you make a good point, Barry. That's just one test on one day. I mean, we have a lot of other indicators that things are going really well, so.
Any other questions for anybody? All right, thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
A lot of really good information. Next up, excuse me, Finance Audit Committee met last week. Clark, Barry, you want to share anything? Or I can read off of my agenda
They're looking
notes.
at each other.
I think you should read off of your list, because it was a very long meeting. It was close to a 2-hour session. So there was just a number of things that we talked about, so why don't you just work down your list?
All right. So monthly financial reports are not available yet because it's year end and they're doing all of the year end tabulations and things like that. But we did go through discussion on the new budget timeline. If you remember, the state changed the timeline, and we will have to have the budget submitted by March 15th this year instead of April 15th. So basically, we just are going to be moving our budget timeline up a month. The certification still happens in April, but the thing we have to do with the state in submitting it has to happen in March now. So we talked a lot about that and looking at the timeline of the budget process. Let's see, we talked about the SAVE bonds that we're going to need to sell for the high school performance venue. We'll be setting a public hearing for that so that we can sell the bonds out. We also talked about all of the capacity. Dave had met with Piper Sandler, which is the group that consults us on how much our bonds are worth and how much we can sell them for, and if we're doing public sale or private sale. And so we went through a lot of charts and numbers on that. So let's be doing that soon. And then we talked a little bit about just the timeline for the PEPL renewal, which we will be looking at late fall, early winter, and then looking to ask the community to renew that sometime in March. So, but that was just the very beginning conversation of that. And I know, I think Dave said ISB is updating all of the information on PEPL to kind of share with us on that, so we can share that out. But PEPL is, help me remember, the physical plant and equipment levy, and we just want to maintain it. We don't want to increase it, we just want to maintain what we have. And we use that for facilities maintenance, so HVAC, windows, parking, playgrounds. It generates between $1.2 and $1.3 million per year that helps us maintain our facilities. So we're not, we'll just be asking to renew that moving forward so that we can continue maintaining our facilities.
And the PEPL thing is huge in this district, and we'll have 3 opportunities to pass that. We would really like to pass that on the first ballot. Correct me if I'm wrong, you two. PEPL has nothing to do with any increase in property tax whatsoever. So it's a vote from district patrons to be able to help us with some property problems that we might be having, or building problems. It also helps us with our playgrounds and those type of things. But just want to emphasize that it has nothing to do with increasing our property tax, and I think that's really important for the patrons of the district to know. And we also got to meet Jonathan. He will be with us soon, and a special thank you to Dave Nicholson, because he's going to stick around a little bit helping in that transition, which is really, really nice of him, really important. And it's a lot better than you're on your own. So it was nice to meet him, and he has some suggestions for us that are all positive for the district.
Any questions?
Thanks.
Clark, Marion City Council.
Okay, Marion City Council, there was really not a whole lot going on in regards to the Linn-Mar district. There was just one piece where ag property in Linn County was switched from agricultural to urban service area. It amounted to about, I think, 9 or 10 households that people are already living in there. But off of East Robbins Road, between Meadow Knock Rolls and Road and Mulberry. And so people are already in there, but they just wanted to make sure that they moved it from ag to urban services. So
Great.
other than that, that was about it. That was the shortest city council meeting ever. So yay for me.
All right, I'll turn it over to Amy for her update.
All right, good evening, everyone. Last week I attended a Grantwood AEA superintendent's meeting. It was our first of the year. The first portion of the meeting, they offer professional development. And Carla tonight talked about HR heavily focusing on employee well-being. And interestingly enough, that was our topic last week. It was adult wellness using an MTSS framework. And that's a presentation that I shared back with Cabinet, so that was timely. And our business meeting consists of a variety of reports from various entities in the state, including Grantwood AEA personnel, school administrators of Iowa, Board of Educational Examiners, Department of Ed, Kirkwood, and Iowa Associations of School Boards. Many of you mentioned Dave, and last Friday was his last official day working for us, although he's on vacation and doing some help behind the scenes. And we definitely wish him well and appreciate the 2 different tenures that he's offered to Linn-Mar. Jonathan officially begins on September 25th, and Dave's going to continue to support us, again, behind the scenes and supporting John in a mentoring role there. You've already mentioned the Finance and Audit meeting, ISAS, so we had a big report, and we heard how our grade levels were doing, our students were doing, and then Friday night, Nathan sent an email out to our families about how they could access their individual child's reports, and so those are available to our parents as well. Kind of a fun thing last week, Andy Park and I met 2 members of the Peak construction team that were on site at the new admin building, and Steve Owen was there, and he's one of the co-owners. And then I met a gentleman by the name of Ethan Krigbaum. And as I was asking him about his training, and he's the superintendent on site, Ethan is a 2020 graduate of Linn-Mar High School. And I just think that that is so phenomenal that he is the superintendent on site at the new admin building. So many props to Ethan and to Peak for hiring Ethan. As far as other construction updates, our performance venue, the design team continues preparing the construction documents. Elevation was set and completed for the west window locations and materials. We've been working on the number of windows that will face out there on 10th Street. Stadium parking lot complete except electric and owner landscaping. I know that's in use. Saw that Friday night during the football game, so that was great to see. Tennis courts, fence fabric installed and waiting for windscreen. Stormwater treatment train complete. Hydro seeding is complete, and they're still waiting for a trench drain there to be delivered. Admin building, there's a lot of work going on. It was fun to see that. I'm going to get it wrong, but the steel structure, we can actually see the kind of the shape of the building, whereas before we saw, maybe some cement on the ground, the footings, that sort of thing. So it's nice to start to see the structure going up there. So slab on grade scheduled to start the week of the 18th. Structural steel is currently being set, as I mentioned there. Site utilities, site electrical are being brought in. We don't often get this, so yay, we have a credit due to a change in generator wind rating specifications, so that's nice to see that. And then there's some Winslow Road paving being done. Not in any particular order, but homecoming week is upon us, so it's super exciting. We're looking forward to the parade and the Powder Puff game on Wednesday. Of course, lots of other activities. I think we have swimming Thursday night, I want to say, the football game Friday night, homecoming dance. And then I want to give a shout out to teacher Ginger Halverson for, as our adaptive PE teacher, being named Shape Iowa as Adaptive Physical Education Teacher of the Year. So shout out to Ginger, that's awesome. And Barry also mentioned the academic honors and the awards that last week. Congratulations to the over 1,000 students, sophomores, juniors, and seniors who were recognized during the August academic assemblies. I was able to get over there for one of those last week, so that's my report.
Any questions for Amy? Thanks. All right, moving on to unfinished business.
To approve the Hawkeye Electric of Hiawatha, Iowa as the lowest responsible bidder regarding the procurement of the early release equipment package for the new performance venue at a base bid of $362,396.
Second.
Motion by Barry and a second by Rachel. Any discussion?
Yeah, I got some small concerns with this. Obviously, we're asking to, or voting to do this because this project is not yet approved. And $360,000 is a fairly substantial amount of money. I'm curious if, and again, this is maybe a minor concern, that if that project doesn't get approved for any reason at all, is there a, I'll call it a restock of this equipment? Are we on the hook for this money, for this equipment, if
You're
we
not.
can't use it in any way, shape, or form?
It's resellable at cost, so we can sell it right back to somebody else who wants it. I asked that question as well.
And the main reason, just to make sure everybody understands, you can chime in, the main reason we're doing this is it's a 12-month lead time to get this equipment in. So we can't wait to bid it in January like we're going to the rest of the event center. So we have to kind of get ahead of that curve. Otherwise, we could be way out waiting on it. So.
Also, you know, there's things that need to happen before that approval takes place. One other concern I have, and was with the conversation I had with Dave. Actually, it was in our I think one of our strategic planning meetings, is the PEPL levy will be part of, that's in our strategic plan to get that on the ballot and to get it passed. And that money is really almost going to have to be required for this project to move ahead, so we're not, or so we are able to maintain all of our buildings. So that is another issue that could potentially be a hiccup with this. But again,
We're going to use SAVE bonds for this project, not PEPL. PEPL would be facilities maintenance. So the way that the funds are laid out, we're looking at SAVE bonds from the SAVE revenue, not PEPL, for the performance venue.
I only bring it up because it was a conversation Dave and I had, and he specifically mentioned the PEPL levy on this project, so that's why I'm bringing it up. So.
Well, I can tell you that in our conversation at Finance Audit, when we looked at the performance venue, Piper Sandler specifically has it laid out as SAVE.
That's fine, and I appreciate, my biggest concern was probably the first one of, if there was something, are we on the hook for it? And if we're not, there's no reason to.
Other questions? A motion by Barry and a second by Rachel. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on to new business.
To approve the depository bank affidavit reports for fiscal year 2022-2023 as presented in Exhibit 501.1.
Second.
Motion by Melissa and a second by Clark. Any discussion? None. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Make a motion to approve the fundraising requests as presented in Exhibit 502.1.
Rachel and a second by Melissa. Any discussion? None. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Approve open enrollment requests as presented.
Second.
Motion by Melissa and a second by Clark. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Melissa and a second by Rachel. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That takes us all the way to board communications. I was going to mention Ginger, but Amy already took care of
Yeah,
it. So
so
once
was
again,
I.
congratulations to Ginger. That's a great, great accomplishment and recognition, well deserved. Looking at our calendar, it's getting quite busy, which feels like it's school's really in session now because we have tons of stuff on our to-do list. First board visit of the year is this Thursday for Hazel Point at 11:30. Looking forward to that. Another reminder that Thursday is the Dine Out for Schools through the foundation, so if you feel like going out to eat, Thursday would be a good day, and the list of restaurants is quite expansive this year, so that's on Thursday as well. We've got some committee meetings coming up. Barry, are you still good to do the city council meeting on the 21st?
Yep.
Great. Second board visit on the 28th to Boulder Peak. Do I have a volunteer for the October 5th? I can't believe I'm saying October. October 5th Marion City Council meeting.
Yeah, I can do it. Oh, that was Rachel.
Rachel.
Rachel? I think I just glanced over and Sandra was writing something. I assumed that the voice was hers. I'm sorry. And then in October, we have another board visit now on the agenda for Oak Ridge on the 12th. You'll note that one is at 8:30 in the morning, so switching things up. We're going to have our first Lion Learning on October 18th, and we're going to focus on the strategic plan to the community. So the community will have a chance to come and learn about the strategic plan now that it's approved. So you don't have to pick tonight, but typically we do ask 3 board members to come. But I'm going to let Amy figure out kind of what that presentation is going to look like. So maybe at the next board meeting we'll figure out who can go to that. And then do I have a volunteer for the October 19th City Council meeting? Great.
I make just a quick thank you comment. Back when the electricity was kicked out at noon, our athletic teams like to meet the night before a football game or the night before cross country or whatever. So the football team could not come into the school. They always did it at the cafeteria. The American Legion stepped up, so just to thank you to American Legion for, it's basically just use our facility, just clean it up when you leave, so it worked out pretty good, so.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else have anything to share? Next up is audience communication. At this time, I'm going to call those who have signed up to speak in the order they have signed up. We will receive and acknowledge comments, but will not engage in a dialogue with the speaker because of the set agenda for the meeting. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per speaker and should be shared in a respectful manner. James Thacker.
Good evening, James Thatcher, Linn-Mar School District residents. I only have 3 minutes, so I must be brief and blunt. Patience. I recommend that this board get some patience with doing your job with due diligence. Last meeting, Matt asked to table only one policy, 504R, so we could get questions answered that he and the public had. It would have been an efficient, effective, and in good public service to table policy 504R to avoid this unprofessional, for questions to get answered, but no, the board wouldn't do that. I'm disappointed, Britannia, that as the president, you didn't take opportunity to avoid this unprofessional public display and support Matt's tabling request. Quite frankly, what's the major problem with the board having just one policy tabled for 2 weeks for Matt to get his questions answered? Whoever it was that was off screen that answered Matt's questions, you did an excellent job. The board's failure to table the topic also put whoever that was in the hot seat. Melissa, I thought you did a good job also of trying to address questions. I'm beginning to wonder if Rachel and Britannia like to argue publicly, which does not impress me. Because Matt had questions, Rachel stated that Matt was unprepared. Because Matt voted for this 2 weeks ago, Rachel says he shouldn't be bringing questions now. Matt correctly stated this is why we do second readings. Rachel stated no, absolutely not. That's not why we do second readings. Once again, Rachel, you're incorrect. When I took proposed laws to the City Council of Cedar Rapids, we had 3 public readings. The reasons for 2 or 3 legislative public hearings is for public to have opportunity to provide input, opinions, and concerns. Come on, use logic. If there's no need for further review after the first hearing, why does law require 2 hearings? With Rachel's belief a board member can ignore input, opinions, or concerns from the public and other board members for legislative action, I'm now wondering if there might be others on the board that share this same flawed viewpoint. The majority of the board ignored 70-plus people speaking in opposition to 50413 policies, with double that amount plus present on April 25, 2022. Policy 504 in the spring of this year had the same type of board response. The same 2 board members argued publicly, revealing their ignorance of Iowa law versus policy 504 and their lack of problem-solving skills with the wording 6 weeks prior to an 18-minute public argument at that meeting. The board seems so tunnel-visioned on IASB being the god of policies that you lost track of your public service job, which is regarding policy review and adoption. Patience. I recommend this board acquire some patience and do the job with due diligence. Thank you.
Wendy Lingo.
Well, that's a long ways to stand up after sitting all that time, but you all know that, don't you? I'm Dr. Wendy Lingo, retired PhD and former principal's daughter, so that making me probably a dangerous entity at a school board meeting. First of all, I want to tell you this is a work of art. You know, what kind of person would print this off and go over it before they came to the meeting if they didn't have to? So you guys did a really great job with it. I just have a quick suggestion in that you're wondering why there's this disconnect as the students move into 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. How about asking the students? Maybe get a little quantitative or qualitative data in there about what the student experiences were, a few, you know, focus groups maybe. Just a possibility that would really enhance your data. So when people have questions about why they're dropping off, are they messing with the bubbles? What's going on here? But you could find out directly from them. That's a real possibility. Thank you. Whoop.
Phones. That ends audience communication. I will take a motion to adjourn at 6:37.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Clark, second by Matt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Have a good night, everybody.